Welcome on board, Chosen One. Look at you. Still here. Still standing after a stretch of time that was built to take you apart. When they went quiet at the wrong moments. When the same faces kept turning up in the same places. When you talked yourself out of the shape you could feel forming around you. Look who's checking the room now. Look who's rehearsing an explanation. Look who ended up standing exactly where they meant to put you. You weren't paranoid. You were early. Here's the part nobody says out loud. There was a structure. It had your measurements. It had a closing date, and that date came and went, and the thing shut with their own people inside it. Not because you fought it, you never touched it. Hit that like button and subscribe to pay this message back and push it toward every chosen one who's been told the danger they sensed was only in their head. Let's continue. Now understand what one of these things actually is, because your mind is reaching for something theatrical. You're picturing a moment, a confrontation, a room where somebody finally says the quiet part, and it all comes apart at once. That's not how any of it works. Nothing that patient is ever loud. A real one gets built slowly, and it gets built to fit. Somebody studies how a person moves, what they'll forgive, which room they'll walk into if the right two people are already sitting in it, how long they'll stay when they're uncomfortable, what they'll hand over to keep the peace. Then a shape gets built around those answers. Think about a suit cut to a body, every measurement taken carefully, every seam placed exactly where that body actually bends. Yours were taken during your softest year, the year you kept absorbing things, the year you kept saying it was fine because you were tired and the alternative was a fight you didn't have in you. That version of you got measured very accurately, and here's what nobody in that room could price in. Bodies change. The numbers were correct on the day they were written down, and they kept cutting to those numbers long after the numbers had stopped being true. They were building for someone who was already gone. You weren't warned. You were never going to be warned. That isn't how any of it functions. But something in you started declining invitations you used to accept. Something in you stopped explaining. You began leaving early with no story attached, and you couldn't have told anyone why. You called it exhaustion. You called it getting older. You called it losing patience with people. It was none of those. Your measurements were changing while the tailor was still cutting. And there's a word for what does that quietly, on a schedule, nobody shows you. The universe doesn't warn people. It repositions them. And hey, Chosen One, yes you, mark this one, drop 777 in the comments, not for luck, not as a charm, as your signal that you're finished apologizing for the instincts that kept moving you out of rooms. Hit like, subscribe. You're not following a channel. You're standing with the people who got out without ever knowing there was something to get out of. And if this is truly yours, if it's landing where it's supposed to land, you'll feel the pull to stay until the very end. Because the last part is where it stops being about them entirely. Before we go a step further, understand how this stays standing. There's a link in the description. It sits in the pinned comment at the top as well, so nobody has to go hunting for it. That link is the only reason these messages keep getting made. It's held open by chosen ones who decided this work was worth protecting. If something in your chest already moved, that's your answer. Support it if you're able. Share the channel if you're not. Both carry the same weight here, and nobody's keeping score. Hit like so, this stops getting buried. Subscribe so you never have to find your way back. And send this channel to one person who's been carrying something heavy in silence. Now let's go step by step. Number 1, the thing they built was real, and it was cut to your exact measurements. You've spent a long time deciding whether you made it up. Stop deciding. It was real. Chosen One, let's tear the curtain open on the part that keeps people awake at 3 in the morning. There was a season where you kept sensing a shape you couldn't name. Rooms that had been arranged before you walked in. Conversations that stopped a half-second too late. The specific feeling of being handled by people who were smiling at you. You brought it up once, maybe twice, and the same sentence came back both times. You're reading into things, so you dropped it. And then you called yourself dramatic for years. Here's what was actually happening. Somebody was doing homework on you, and homework is not an emotion. It's a task, with hours attached, done by people who go home afterwards and eat dinner. Imagine this. A table where the seating got decided before anyone arrived. Not by chance, somebody thought about who should sit beside you, who should sit across from you, who should be nearest the door. And then that person watched your face for the first 10 minutes to see which of the three you noticed. Imagine this. A message forwarded to one person and quietly held back from another. Nothing you could ever point at. No lie told. Just a small edit in who knows what, made 3 separate times inside a single month, each one moving you a little further from the middle of things. Or picture the smallest one. A meeting that got moved, and the notice reached everyone but you by a margin of about 40 minutes. Long enough to matter, short enough that an apology covers it completely. And maybe you're wondering, why would anyone go to that much trouble over me? Here's the uncomfortable answer. Trouble is proportional to threat. Nobody builds carefully around a person they can simply ignore. The effort is the compliment, and it's the only one they'll ever pay you. Was I naive for staying so long? No, you read the danger accurately, and you got exactly one thing wrong. You thought it was personal dislike, it was procedure. Think about a tailor's notebook. Shoulders reach the exact place the body bends, written down in a steady hand. Correct on the day. Everything after that is cloth being cut to numbers on a page by people who never look up at the body again. That's what was happening in the rooms you weren't in. Or picture one more. A conversation you walked in on that ended a half-beat too neatly. Not the words were nothing. The shape of the silence after them. And the way two people looked at the same spot on the table instead of at you. You went home that night and told yourself you were tired. You weren't tired. You'd just walked through the middle of the work being done on you, and your body registered it before your mind agreed to. That's the thing nobody explains about being measured. The body knows first. You get quieter in rooms you used to be easy in. You start choosing the seat with your back to a wall, for reasons you couldn't defend out loud if somebody asked. You're not dramatic, you're documented. You're not sensitive, you're calibrated. You're not difficult, you're expensive to plan around, and expensive people get planned around anyway. You weren't being disliked, you were being sized. You aren't imagining the year you lost. You're remembering it correctly. And that changes everything about how you're allowed to think of yourself now. Number 2, they needed you predictable, and you quietly stopped being that. Every structure like this rests on one assumption, that the person keeps behaving the way they've always behaved. They don't need you weak, they need you consistent. Chosen one, this is the hinge the entire thing turns on, so let's slow down here. There was a version of you that could be counted on. That version answered every message, explained herself to people who'd already made up their minds. Showed up because not showing up would start a conversation, and the conversation always cost more than the evening did. That version was dependable, and dependable is the only ingredient a plan like that actually requires. Then something shifted, and it shifted without an announcement, which is why nobody caught it in time. Imagine this, an invitation you would have accepted for 6 straight years. You look at it, you feel nothing at all. You put the phone face down, go to bed, and never think about it again. Somebody, somewhere, is still waiting for the yes that always came. Imagine this. A situation you'd normally have stepped into, the temperature rising, 2 people looking at you, the rescue expected, and your hands stay still. You watch it burn itself out, and afterwards nobody can quite explain what was different, only that something was. Or picture the quietest one. A question engineered to pull a reaction out of you, delivered in front of an audience. You hear it land. You say, "That's interesting." You change nothing about your face. And the person who asked it goes home unsettled and doesn't know why. Why did people start acting so strange around you at exactly that point? Simple. You stop producing data. A person who no longer reacts on schedule cannot be scheduled around. Am I imagining that things went cold right after? You're not. That chill wasn't a punishment. It was recalculation, and it took them months. Won't they just adjust? They tried. But you can't remeasure someone who's no longer standing still for it. Think about an outdated radar. Nothing in it is broken. The dish turns, the screen glows. The operator is good at the job. But it was built to catch a specific altitude and a specific speed, and something's now moving that uses neither. The screen stays empty, and the room decides the sky is empty too. And here's the detail worth keeping. None of that was a decision. You never sat down one evening and chose to withdraw. There was no plan, no moment, no line in the sand. Something in you simply stopped signing off on the cost. That's what makes it unrecoverable for them. A decision can be reversed by pressure. A habit can be talked back into a person. But nobody has ever argued somebody back into caring about a thing they've quietly finished with. Imagine this. Somebody testing the old button one more time, months later. The same tone, the same bait, word for word, because it worked for years. Watching your face for the flinch that used to arrive on cue, and getting nothing back but polite attention, which is the most expensive thing you can hand a person who came for a reaction. You're not colder, you're finished paying. You're not harder, you're just no longer available at the old price. You're not avoiding anyone. You're simply not arriving when called, and that's a different thing entirely. You didn't become unpredictable on purpose. You just stopped paying the tax. You're not distant. You're done volunteering. Hold here for a second, chosen one. You're well past the point where most people scroll away. That says something about what you're actually looking for. If this is reaching you, keep the signal alive. The support link is in the description, and it's pinned at the top of the comments, so it's never more than one tap away. Every contribution that comes through it pays for another message like this one, for somebody who hasn't found their way here yet. Not everyone can give. Nobody here is asking you to. Sharing the channel costs nothing and travels further than money ever does. So take whichever one is yours. Like the video, subscribe. Pass this channel to someone who's been calling their own instincts a character flaw. Back to it. Number 3, the ones who built it had to stand inside it while they waited for you. This never occurs to the person the thing was built for. It's the best part. A structure like that isn't a hole in the ground. It requires attendance. Somebody has to keep the arrangement warm. Somebody has to maintain relationships they don't enjoy. Somebody has to keep saying the story out loud, in the right rooms at the right intervals, so it stays alive in other people's mouths. That's not free. That's labor, and it gets performed by people standing in the exact place they intended you to end up. Imagine this, a group that now has to keep meeting, not because they like each other, because the arrangement requires a standing meeting, and cancelling it means admitting the point of it has expired. So they sit there, same table, same 4 faces, talking about a person who isn't coming. Imagine this. 2 of them who never got along, now welded together by a version of events they both have to keep telling. Every time one repeats it, the other has to nod along. That's a rope, and both ends are tied to a neck. Or picture the one that costs the most. Somebody who has to be careful now, careful about who they're seen with, careful about which rooms they walk into, in case they end up next to someone who knows you well and asks a direct question. Wouldn't they just stop? They can't. Stopping is a confession, and none of them can afford to go first. Isn't that a kind of prison? It's exactly that. It's just one they built themselves with their own hands and their own weekends for a guest who never showed. And how long can that hold? Longer than you'd think, and every extra month makes leaving more expensive for whoever leaves first. Think about scaffolding on the side of a building, poles, planks, boards hanging off something else. It's only ever meant to be temporary. Leave it up long enough and it stops being a tool and becomes the thing you maintain. In weather, at cost, indefinitely, that's what they've got now. Imagine one more, the person whose job became keeping the story current. Not telling it once. Keeping it current, the way you'd water something. Every few weeks a small refresh delivered casually to somebody new, in a tone that has to sound spontaneous every single time. That's work. Nobody thanked them for taking it on, and nobody is going to relieve them of it. And the audience keeps shrinking. The ones who found it interesting at the start have moved on to their own lives. The newer ones don't have the background and don't want it. So the story gets told to a smaller and smaller room by a person who can no longer stop telling it. You're not being talked about the way you imagine at 2 in the morning. You're being maintained, badly, by people who'd rather be doing almost anything else. You're not their enemy. You're their unfinished task. You're not on their mind. You're on their schedule. And there's no worse place to sit for the person holding the calendar. They aren't free, they're on duty. And you were the only person who could have released them by arriving. You never arrived. Number 4. It couldn't close on the day it was supposed to close. Everything built around a person has a date attached. Somebody always knows roughly when. Chosen one, let's slow walk into this one, because it's heavier than it sounds. There was a season it was meant to land in, a window when you'd be at your most tired, most isolated, most willing to accept a bad arrangement just to make the noise stop. That window was chosen carefully. There was nothing random about the timing, and you didn't arrive in the condition the timing required. Imagine this. A month circled by somebody who was counting on you being at the end of your rope, and in that month of all the months you were fine. Not thriving, just level, cooking your own food, going to bed early, answering nobody, wearing out a pair of shoes on the same walk every evening. Imagine this. A phone that was supposed to ring, somebody waiting on the call that would have started the sequence. It doesn't come that week. It doesn't come the week after either. And the whole thing gets pushed, and pushing it means telling other people it's been pushed. Or picture the third delay, the one where somebody senior stops asking when and starts asking whether. That's a different question entirely, and everyone in the room hears the difference. And maybe you're asking, how does a delay hurt them? It hurts more than a defeat would. Everything built to a timeline decays when the timeline slips. People lose their nerve. Someone reconsiders their part in it. Somebody asks a question they weren't supposed to ask, and nobody has a clean answer ready. Why now? Because delay is the one condition none of it was designed to survive. Wasn't that just chance? No. It was the universe running its own schedule, which has never once matched theirs. Think about a spring-loaded door held open by hand. For a minute it costs nothing. For an hour your arm shakes. Hold it open long enough and the mechanism itself gives up, and afterwards it doesn't close properly at all, for anyone. They held it open for you for a very long time. Imagine one more. The conversation where somebody finally suggests moving on to something else, not dropping it, just parking it for now. And watch how the room handles that suggestion. Because agreeing means that whole stretch of months went nowhere, and disagreeing means committing to another one. Nobody in there wants to be the person who says the word wasted out loud. So it stays open, not because it's alive, because closing it requires an admission, and admissions have to be made by a specific person. in front of specific people with a name attached to them afterwards. You've been picturing yourself as somebody who escaped something. Turn that around, you were never inside it. It was a room with a door propped open, and the only people who ever stood in there are the ones holding the door. You're not the one who got out. You're the one who never walked in. You're not the survivor of that year. You're the reason it exists as a year at all. You weren't spared because somebody showed mercy. You were spared because you were late in a way nobody could correct. Number 5. The pressure they aimed at you was the same pressure holding their own arrangement upright. Sit with this one. There's real weight in it. Pressure isn't free either. It has a source. And the source is always something else being held together. An arrangement like that runs on favors, on alliances that only work while everyone believes the same story, on debts that stay quiet as long as the plan keeps moving. The plan is the reason all of it stays in one piece. Remove the plan and you don't get peace. You get everyone looking at each other. Imagine this. Someone who agreed to help on the understanding that it'd be finished within a season. That season passes, then another. And now they're attached to something that has produced nothing, and they've started to resent the person who brought them in. They haven't said it yet. But it's in the room. Imagine this, a promise made upward. Just tell us when it's handled. And every single time those two people speak, that sentence sits between them, unanswered, getting louder by being unmentioned. Or picture the quietest one. Somebody who joined because it looked like the winning side, and nothing has been won. They're doing arithmetic now, working out what leaving costs, and who they'd have to be honest with on the way out. Isn't this dangerous for you? Less than you think. Every month it stayed open, the danger drifted further from you and settled closer to them. Won't they retaliate harder? With what? Retaliation runs on the same fuel the original plan ran on, and that tank has been standing open to the air for a year. What if they start again from scratch? Then they need everyone back, and half of those people have privately decided they were misled the first time. Think about a load-bearing wall. It looks like it's separating two rooms. It isn't. It's holding the ceiling. Remove the reason it was built, and you don't end up with more space. You end up with everything above it arriving on the floor. Imagine one more. The moment one of them has to ask another for a favor that has nothing to do with you at all. Something ordinary, and realizing halfway through the sentence that the account is empty. Everything they had was spent on a thing that never landed, and the person across the table is running the same arithmetic at the same time. That's the real cost of a failed arrangement, not embarrassment. Standing. And standing was the currency the whole thing ran on. Every plan like that has a moment where continuing costs more than stopping. That moment arrived somewhere in the middle of an entirely ordinary week, and nobody marked it, and they all kept going anyway. People do. You're not the reason they're struggling. You're the reason the struggle has no ending they can point at. You're not their obstacle. You're their receipt. You're not what they lost to. You're what they spent everything on and never received. Your name was the load-bearing part of an arrangement you were never told about. You didn't pull anything down. You stopped standing where the weight was aimed. Number 6. They had to explain your absence to people who'd been promised your arrival. Here's a cost nobody plans for. Other people knew about this. Something that size can't be kept between two mouths. It has an audience, and the audience is waiting. Imagine this. Someone who was told, with real confidence, that within a few months you'd be finished. That person waits. They keep seeing you carry on, unremarkably, buying groceries, existing, and slowly their attention moves off you and onto the person who made the promise. Imagine this. A dinner where your name comes up by accident and the table goes still for one beat too long, not because of you, because everyone sitting there remembers a prediction and every one of them can see it didn't happen, or picture the worst version. A newcomer with no history in any of it, who innocently asks whatever came of that thing, and nobody at that table has an answer that doesn't sound like failure said politely. Will anyone ever tell you this happened? No, and that's precisely why it counts. Nobody performs a defeat they can still hide. Am I supposed to feel satisfied about it? You don't have to feel anything at all. It happened whether or not you enjoy it, and it's still happening on evenings you'll never hear about. Doesn't that make them dangerous now? It makes them careful. Careful people move slowly, and slow is the opposite of what they needed. Think about a table set for a guest. Places laid, one chair left open, everyone glancing at the door between courses. The food goes cold in stages, and at some point the host has to make a decision about that empty chair, while every person there watches him make it. That was their year. Imagine one more. The specific person who staked their judgment on you being finished. They said it with certainty, in front of people whose opinion of them actually matters to their life. And they've had to sit in rooms with those same people ever since, while you keep visibly not being finished. Nothing has to be said out loud for that to work on somebody. Presence does all of it. Your ordinary continued existence is the entire argument, and you make it every day without knowing. They can't even complain about it. There's no grievance available. You haven't done anything to them. You've just kept getting up in the morning in a way that quietly contradicts a sentence they can't take back. You're not competing with them. You're outlasting them, and it requires nothing from you but breath. You're not their rival. You're the evidence against their judgment. You're not the story anymore. You're the part of the story that didn't come true, and that's the only part anyone remembers. They didn't lose an argument with you. They lost credibility with the people they still need. Number 7, it needed your reaction, and you never once fed it one. Every mechanism built around a person has one moving part: the person. Chosen one, this is where it stops being about their competence entirely. It was designed for someone who'd answer, who'd correct the record, who'd send the long message at midnight, who'd show up somewhere to clear things up, or say one sharp sentence to the wrong person on a bad day. That single reaction was the whole engine. Everything after it was supposed to run on its own. Imagine this. A comment made in front of you, deliberately, with a pause left afterwards for you to fill. And you let the pause stay empty. Somebody else in that room learns something permanent in those 4 seconds, and it isn't about you. Imagine this. A message written specifically to provoke a reply. You read it, you don't respond, and not as strategy. You genuinely have nothing to say. 3 days later, it's still sitting there, doing the exact opposite of what it was sent to do, and the sender has read their own words 11 times. Or picture the one you'll recognize instantly. A story about you repeated to your face, in a tone that invites you to defend yourself. And you say, all right, just that. And you go back to what you were doing, and the room reorganizes itself around your calm. Why do people get so uncomfortable when you won't argue? Because an argument is a place to put you. Without one, you stay unfiled, and unfiled people can't be handled. Was that a strategy? No, and that's exactly why it worked. Strategy has a tell. Genuine indifference doesn't. Isn't silence just avoidance? Not here. Avoidance still cares about the outcome. You'd stopped caring, and they could hear it. Think about a lever with nothing on the other end. The mechanism is perfect. The handle turns smoothly the way it was machined to. It just isn't connected to anything. So pulling harder only exhausts the person pulling. Imagine one more. The long message that never got sent. Not by them, by you. You wrote it. You know exactly the one. Every point ordered, every receipt attached, the whole case laid out so cleanly that no reasonable person could have argued with a line of it. and then you deleted it and went to bed feeling like a coward. You've carried that as weakness for years. It wasn't. That unsent message is the most expensive thing you never gave them. It was the one piece of proof they needed that you were still standing inside the situation with them, still playing, still reachable. You took it back before it ever left your hands. You're not passive, you're unavailable, you're not letting them win, you're refusing to enter the only arena where a win was ever possible for them. You're not silent because you have no answer. You're silent because the answer stopped being worth the postage. They worked that handle for a year. You didn't defeat it. You declined to power it. Number 8. Somebody warned them about you early, and they went ahead anyway. There's always one. In every arrangement like this, there's a person who read it correctly at the start. They're never the loudest voice. They're usually the oldest one. Imagine this. An early conversation, 4 or 5 people, and one of them says quietly, "Leave this one alone," not out of affection for you, out of experience. They've seen this exact shape before, and they know what it does to the people who touch it, and they get overruled the way caution always gets overruled in a room that's already decided. Imagine this. That same person, many months later, sitting in a meeting about why nothing has moved, saying nothing at all, watching the people who wave them off try to explain a delay to somebody senior. They don't gloat. They don't need to. They just let the silence do its work. Or picture this one. A newer face joins, senses the mood, and asks privately what actually went wrong here. And the cautious one finally gives an answer they've been holding for a very long time, in about 9 words. Will you ever find out who that was? Never. And it doesn't matter. The point isn't the identity. The point is that an accurate assessment of you existed, in a room, before any of it started. Doesn't that just mean they underestimated me? It's worse than that for them. The correct read was available and free, and they refused it. That's a wound no outcome heals, because it can't be blamed on bad information. Think about a weather alert nobody acted on. The signal went out. It was on time, and it was right. The failure wasn't in the warning. It was in a room full of people who preferred their own plan to the sky, and the cost of ignoring that lands somewhere very specific. Not on you, on the room. Imagine one more, a newer arrangement, a long time later, aimed at somebody else entirely, different person, different circumstances, same shape, and the cautious one speaks up again, and this time nobody overrules them, because every person in that room is quietly remembering how the last one went. You'll never meet the person your survival protected. They exist anyway. That's the part that should sit with you tonight. It didn't stop with you. Things like this never stop with one person, in either direction. You're not just an outcome, you're a precedent. You're not a story they tell about you. You're a caution they now tell about themselves. You're not the one who got away. You're the reason the next attempt never made it out of the room. Afterwards, everybody remembers who said what. Imagine this. The cautious one, alone in a car afterwards, not feeling vindicated at all, just tired, knowing they'll be asked again and knowing they'll be overruled again because rooms don't learn, only people do. You weren't underestimated by accident. You were misread on purpose by people who'd been told better and chose otherwise. Number 9, nobody will ever tell you it happened, and that's the exact shape of a real win. Here's the part you've been quietly waiting for, so let's be honest about it. You want the scene, the admission. Somebody standing in front of you saying, "We built something for you, it failed, and you were right the whole time." That scene doesn't exist. It has never once been delivered to anyone. Imagine this. A person who knows every detail sitting across from you at some ordinary gathering, talking about the weather and the traffic. They know all of it, you know none of it, and they'll carry that to the end of their life without a word, because saying it costs them everything and costs you nothing. Imagine this, the one who was most invested seeing you somewhere public, a shop, a car park, and doing the only available thing, which is a small nod and then distance, and then a strange evening afterwards that they don't explain to anyone at home. Or picture the last one. Years from now, at the edge of a conversation, somebody half mentions something and catches themselves mid-sentence and changes the subject too fast. And you feel the floor tilt for 1 second, and then it passes, and you never get the rest. That's the entire disclosure you'll ever receive. A tilt in the floor. Imagine this, a message drafted on their side and never sent. 3 lines, deleted, rewritten, deleted again over the course of one evening. And then the phone goes face down on the arm of a chair, and that's the end of the only apology that was ever nearly real. Am I supposed to live without ever being told? You already have been. You've been living inside the result this whole time you were waiting for the announcement. Isn't that unfair? It is. It's also the only version of winning that exists in situations like this one, and refusing to accept it doesn't produce a better version. It just keeps you at the door. So what do I do with it? Nothing. That's the strange gift here. There's nothing left for you to do about a thing that has already finished. Think about a courtroom clearing a name in an empty room. No gallery, no press, nobody standing to hear it read. The finding gets entered anyway. It's completely real and completely binding, and not one person involved is ever notified. And there's a reason it has to work this way, and it's worth understanding instead of resenting. An admission would give you something to hold, a sentence you could repeat, a version of events with a witness attached to it. The moment that exists, the whole thing becomes shared, and shared things can be reopened, argued over, relitigated years later by people who were never in the room. Unconfirmed things can't be reopened. There's nothing to grip. Imagine one more. Somebody, a long way from now, trying to raise it in order to make their own peace with it, and discovering there's no way to begin the sentence that doesn't cost them more than the peace is worth. So they say nothing again, the way they've said nothing for years. You're not being denied closure. You're holding the version nobody can take back. You're not waiting on the truth. You're already living inside the outcome of it. You're not owed an explanation. You received the thing the explanation would have been about. That's your verdict, filed and unread. You're not owed a scene. You were handed the outcome the scene would have been about. Number 10, you stopped defending yourself, and that's the month the whole thing came apart. Here at the end, all of this narrows to a single point. There was a specific stretch of time when you stopped arguing your own case. Not dramatically. You simply ran out of appetite for being understood by people who'd already decided. You thought that was surrender. You've carried it as a small, private shame ever since. It was the opposite. It was the one event the entire structure couldn't survive. Imagine this, you sitting in a car outside your own home, engine off, not preparing the sentence you were going to use to explain yourself. Realizing halfway up the path that the sentence isn't there anymore, and feeling only mild surprise at its absence, the way you'd notice a chair that's been moved. Imagine this, a conversation where somebody repeats the story about you word for word, and your chest stays level. No heat, no urge. You hear it the way you'd hear a weather report about a town you moved out of a decade ago. Imagine this, the night you removed one name from your phone with no ceremony at all, no message, no announcement, no last word to make the point land. Just an absence where a person used to be, and a night of sleep that came easier than any night that year. And you might be asking, how could quitting be the strongest thing I ever did? Because everything aimed at you required your participation. Defense is participation. The moment you withdrew it, they were left holding a machine with no fuel in it. Why did it collapse right then? Because a story about a person needs that person to keep contesting it. The second you stopped, It stopped being a fight and became a rumor with nobody in it. Wasn't that just giving up? Absolutely not. Giving up is walking off the board and going home to grieve. You did the rarer thing. You stepped off the board and kept living well, and there's no counter for that. Nobody has ever developed one. Think about a parasite that's lost its host. Nothing attacks it. No one hunts it. It simply stops being fed, and every mechanism it grew for holding on becomes useless equipment attached to nothing. Imagine one more, and then we'll close this properly. The first ordinary morning afterwards. Nothing marked it. No message came, no apology, no sign, no phone call from anybody admitting anything. Just you, awake a few minutes before the alarm, making coffee in a quiet kitchen, thinking about something entirely unrelated. That was it. That was the morning the whole thing finished, and you spent it thinking about a work email and whether you needed bread. That's how these actually end. Not with a scene. With a person who stops carrying something and doesn't notice the weight is gone until much later, usually while doing something ordinary. You didn't stop fighting. You stopped being available for the fight. You're not the one who lost that year. You're the only person who got to keep what it built. You're not the target anymore. You're the thing they'd have to explain, and not one of them is willing to start that sentence. That's what happened in the rooms around you. Imagine this. Somebody trying to describe you tried to a person who's never met you, and running out of material halfway through. No dramatic ending to report, no collapse. Nothing to hand over except a shrug and a sentence that keeps getting shorter every year they tell it. You didn't win. You became inedible. And now, chosen one, everything comes full circle. Go back to where this started. A structure with your measurements taken during your softest year. A closing date. A group of people arranged carefully around a person they were certain they knew. That person doesn't exist anymore. The measurements were accurate, and then they went stale. The timing was chosen well, and you didn't arrive in the condition it required. The pressure was real, and it was holding up their own ceiling the entire time. The warning was given, and it was ignored by people who now have to sit in rooms with the one who gave it. The tests, the years you counted as lost. The nights nobody saw, they weren't punishment. They were the exact process that changed your shape while the cutting was still going on. While they were building, you were becoming something the build no longer fit. Go back once more to that first image. A table where the seating was arranged before you walked in. That table is still set. The chair meant for you is still empty, and every person sitting around it knows what that empty chair means. They'll never tell you. None of this will ever be confirmed. You've spent a long time believing that the absence of proof meant the absence of danger, or worse, that it meant you invented all of it. The absence of proof is what a survived trap looks like from the inside. Every quiet month you counted as loss was another month it stayed open, and open cost them more than closed ever would have. They can still watch you, they will. That part never fully stops. But watching a person you can no longer measure is just spectating, and spectators have never once changed an outcome. Your rise isn't coming. It started in the silence you mistook for being forgotten. Walk into it knowing there's nothing left inside the shape they built but the people who built it. If this message hit home, chosen one, like the video and subscribe. Drop 77 in the comments. And share this with someone who's been calling their own instincts paranoia, when they were something far more expensive than that.